this idea of luminous, I think, is a really good place to start with you. Because aside from the fact that, you know, you'll say Nikolas and most people know who you mean, but you say luminous public artist on Instagram and they're like, oh yeah. So it's very much part of your identity is based in this, the physical way that you make the work, right? It's not as based in what it's work of or even what the style is, but it's actually like the physical formulation of the work is so important to you.
And structure.
Right, and so maybe just by way of saying, for the record, a little bit about, you know, what we're looking at, you know, how it is without, you know, divulging too much. Is there a trade secret?
Oh, no,
okay, so just basically luminosity, why and how you chase that. Did you go through a light box phase and decide that was too fiddly? And then eventually for the last little while, you've been working in this very specific way where the painting actually happens on plexi, mostly. But then that lives on canvas because it's a painting and you got tired of explaining to people that it was a painting, right? Well, so tell me just and tell them how you got to doing it this way.
Yeah. Well, so I for many, many years, I was like, okay, I know I want to work with transparent materials because I had this thing where, okay, I'm looking at paintings. The paintings are always, all the information is trapped. And I mean that in the process of making art, I end up trapping my own activity and losing all this stuff. And so thus I came this thing, I'm like, okay, if I could figure out a way to retain information as I move through the process. So I started off with Scotch tape. And I would work and then I'd just Scotch tape over it and then I'd keep working and I'd Scotch tape over it and I was like, okay, that's really cool.
Kind of like cheating with, as though it could be resin layers.
Yeah, exactly.
The light bouncing around in between.
Yeah, exactly. And so I did that for a while and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I'm like, okay, what about Mylar? You know, oh wow, Mylar. And then I tried that and then I'm like, I realized I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, glass. And that's really what I'm dealing with, what I'm talking about. That's the structure, the transparent material that dominates our lives, that's everywhere in architecture and it's everywhere. And so I started, because glass is really heavy, I immediately gravitated to plexiglass. And someone was asking me about this the other day, like, did I immediately find this printmaking process? And I didn't immediately, but almost immediately. Like, pretty quickly I was like, okay, because I've done a lot of printmaking, I've done a lot of monotyping, I've done a lot of intaglio, and I'm like, okay, this is, even in monotyping, you use pieces of plexiglass to do the printing. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna...
And that sort of fractal puckering and stuff, that is what occurs naturally when you do that. Like,
yes.
Whether you like it or not.
Which I adore,
right.
So yeah.
I think that's something that's integral.
Integral to the process. And then I can control that, and I've learned to control that in many, many different ways in terms of how I mix the paint, how much pigment, how much medium, how much varnish, the density, the viscosity, then subtle things about sort of how you print. You know, do you do it very strong, you know, with a lot of strength? Do you do it in this very soft way? Do you do it where you're just like this piece that's in the hallway there? Can we ever be our whole selves if we are so deeply divided? It has this layer of blue that, you know, this is super nerdy in a way, but it has this layer of blue where I captured brush strokes. So it's almost like in the way that maybe like Jasper Johns or Rauschenberg would actually use the brushstroke in a lithograph or use the brushstroke in a monotype. But I'm doing it in this completely weirdly, almost super analog way where I'm almost like it's a wood block, you know, where the edges of the paint are like a wood block. But so there's a lot of different subtle ways to get these different textures, is all I'm saying, these different qualities.
It's so interesting because in a sense, I mean, I'm looking at them and I want to just say like the paintings, but it's like they almost are everything except painting.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah. Well, I tell everyone they're all prints. Everything is a print.
Interesting.
Because they're while I use a brush occasionally to...
And occasionally there's finite finer, more finely rendered imagery that you need to achieve as well.
Right, but even that is done with a salad dressing container, so it's poured. Everything, almost everything is either poured or it's applied with a brush, but then printed from, so that I would basically, in fact, it's funny that we were talking about that piece. I would dare you to find a brush stroke, like an actual brush stroke in any of the work, which is what you're saying. Like,
because there were no brushes.
Because there's no brushes involved, exactly.
See, so it's a trick question.
Exactly, and then that's part of why
Okay.
I gravitated to making these on canvases, is that then you get this thing of like, okay, that's a painting, but then you're looking at it, you're like, well, if it's a painting, then how come I don't see a brush stroke, and da-da-da-da, and then you realize...
And then in some of them, like the one on this wall behind us, where there's a lot of negative space, you're really like daring people to figure it out, because there's just sort of like this gessoed white canvas that should be the ground on which everything is painted, and yet it's pristine.
Well, and more than that, it's actually, this is interesting you say that. So that particular piece, you just used the word ground. When you think of figure ground, you think of something that recedes, and that's at the back. In that piece, what you just referred to as the ground is actually at the very front. It is at the very surface of the piece. So, but when you look at it, your brain goes like...
Oh, your brain puts it behind.
Yeah, your brain puts it behind. And so that's kind of like this weird optical illusion / like messing with your expectations thing that I find happens in the work.
Well, I think that also too, that's where all of the, that's where it all bounces around. That's where all the light bounces around. What, you know, what old school, and not only old school, but we think of as, you know, the painters who varnished. That's why they did that, right? To create that surface, reflection, and to keep the light bouncing around, which keeps the eye and creates more depth and activates all the colors.
They would do the whole surface, right?
Right. And they would do it last.
And they would do it last so that it like captures this thing, right?
Right.
In the salon, right? But what I love is that I'm using glass, so it already has this reflective, varnished quality. And then by creating matte surfaces like this yellow, which then do this kind of optical thing this way, but then in other pieces by also then adding in glaze. So there's a glaze, and then there's the surface of the glass, and then there's the matte surface. So there's becomes these like really very uniquely differing areas of information, and like sort of the way that light, this gets back to luminosity, because I call all the works luminous, even the ones that aren't illuminated, because they absorb so much light. And like, so this piece is really cool because when we hung it on the wall, it's funny because Monet was saying like she saw it flat at the studio, and she's like, oh my god, she couldn't almost recognize it. But when we hung it on the wall, and a lot of people were like, it's so deep.
Yeah,
like
well, even looking here at this angle, it's like,
it feels like, it feels like there's this like depth, but it's still, so that's achieved, or happens, I think is a better word. It happens because of allowing matte versus varnished versus the glass surface. So you get this thing with reflections, and I love that the exterior world, just like light, enters into the piece and becomes this thing that you're living with as you're interacting with it. It's not reflection, I need to move over here so I can avoid it. It's that it's part of the piece.
Well, it's so interesting because it's all of these ideas are things that are very common to hear painters talking about, right? I want to create a sense of motion, to create, to sort of split the difference with something that might seem like it just happened organically, or, there's a lot of concerns that you are pursuing that are, fairly frequently discussed among painters, and yet, as you said, this is not technically a painting practice. I mean, it is.
It's it's using.
It's in conversation with painting, more so than with printmaking. But behind that is you're doing it using these printmaking techniques, and so you're sort of a little bit to one side of if you, in other words, I don't know, even if you could figure out a way, if you had pursued the Scotch tape method or whatever, and these were still sort of mixed media paintings on canvas and there's or something in that way, it wouldn't, I don't think you could. Like so much of what's going on is because of your willingness to use this unconventional material.
Yeah.
And it's not even that it's unconventional, like it's why people frame things behind glass, right? Like seeing a painting behind plexiglass
as a kid
right.
I was like, okay, there's glass covering all the art, there's glass actually like protecting the the Mona Lisa or whatever. There's
from soup or what have you.
From environmentalists gluing themselves to it or something. There's glass is like in our lives. It's in our cars. It's everywhere.
Screens.
We're always looking through glass, and so this idea that I am obsessed with, which is that life is layered, and that I should reflect that in my work. And that that came from those initial sets of drawings where I was like, okay, actually what it came from was this. I did a lot of portraiture, actually, and people would move, and instead of being like, look, you really need to sit still because I'm trying to fucking draw you, okay,
yeah,
right, is I would just let that roll, and so then I would end up with these really strangely surreal kind of drawings where people are shifting and moving. And that to me became, okay, there's all these layers of information and these like different time frames and different perspectives, and not like cubism, but just like these different, references, frames of reference. And then I'm like, okay, well, how can I get that? So I was being very literal, but this is so much more philosophical, or it just has like, because it's really about these more symbolic ideas, like, so this rainbow in this piece it's the symbol of a rainbow. It's not the exact rainbow colors, right? And it's going to, this triangle is going towards the eye. Like I'm obsessed with this thing called the arrow of time, or the light tunnel.
Of course you are.
Which is the idea that this amazing idea that every single person has their own photons.
Aww.
We do not share photons.
Oh, who told you that?
I read about it. It's some like amazing physics book. No, not on the internet. No. So it's not like that at all. Like we literally only have our own personal photons. Like they don't bounce off our eye and then you get to share with it. They're just our own. And so it's a little bit of a nutty idea. But
yeah. I'm gonna have to look into that on my own time.
Okay. But it's there. It's in the work.
Yeah. Hey, look, it's fine. It's fine. No. But okay. Oh, my heart. But the thing is about that, which is like the craziest thing I've ever heard. Oh my god. But you know what? Who cares? If that's the philosophy that you're working with, like, just like I can't disprove it. Certainly not from here. And when it comes, I mean, that's kind of the beautiful thing about the world of creativity is like, yeah, that's my guiding philosophy. Like,
well, I mean,
come and get it. And so, you know what I mean? So it's like, if that's the internal logic that's animating the work and that's keeping it all, together as one idea, then you kind of like bootstrap paradox it into reality. Doctor Who fan.
Yes.
So I'm not going to give you too much shit because I say things like timey-wimey and I expect people to know what I'm talking about.
Yes, so that's what I figured.
Enough.
I figured you would be
That's TARDIS blue if ever I've seen it.
Yes.
So yes, I'm mocking, but I'm secretly kind of with you. But the thing is, I think that's so, like, it's hilarious, but it's also so important, right? Because that's the other thing, like, to bring all this back, like, we could have the whole rest of this conversation about the form and the technique and your manipulation of medium and material, and like we could have that conversation because there's a lot of that. But this is not these are not almost ever abstract works. Like there are images and there are narratives as well as philosophies going on behind that. So it's sort of like, Diana, like, it would be enough if you were going to just be like ab X by another means, and these were your optical principles, and it had to do with the sort of philosophical quadrant of how cognition works. That would be
Yeah.
Plenty. And we could just talk about that.
Yeah.
But, not that it's a secret, but to say, I know you, I've read the materials, I've talked to you about this, that, you know, the images are not there just to be people. There's a story of your life that's also going on in these pictures. Well, and a story of your own identity investigating.
This is my black grandfather, William, and this is my white grandfather, William.
Oh.
Yeah.
Coincidence, I like that.
Coincidence.
Well, since you like doubling, that's a nice...
Thank you. You know, it's so hilarious. You just said the thing, certainly I'm like, okay, if that's... But I hadn't actually thought that, which is great. But of course that is like... Boom.
How you work, that's how you know, the prints work.
Well, and that's
way.
what makes the painting. That's what makes the painting, and it's what you were just saying. That's what makes the painting have this interior integrity, or this interior logic, or this interior content that like fits, you know, goes through. And so, yeah, if he'd been Jack and he had been Ed, I still would have made the painting. But the fact that it's William and William is rad.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And so, you know, that's super interesting, right? Because those are ways of making visual art that you don't often see coexisting in a single project or image or object, which is like my very specific and super interesting and meaningful life story and my very inventive technique and process driven studio language.
And how they match
of
up.
abstraction.
Yeah.
And like you it's very rare in my experience to see those things occupy the same time and place, but also they're not separate things that you're smashing together. It's not like that there's a photo collage of them or something. Like you're making the images that go with that story the same way that you're making the abstract sort of neural net field that they live in. And so there's a lot of holistic action between pieces that really should be disparate.
What you just reminded me is that's part of why I don't, and this one obviously doesn't look like my grandfather's, but that's why, and this is the only piece that even references that in its title, but why these people are everybody and not a particular person. And that is, that's an abstraction. The idea that you make a symbol, I mean, this is where my head goes, like the idea that you make a symbol and you're like, here's my painting, and it's a person, and people go, that's a person. That is nothing but abstract. Like, that is all abstraction. Like, yes, the figuration part is there because that's, you know, what that's what the reference is.
That's that, like, Derrida rabbit hole of, like, it's you know, it's not a pipe, it's a painting.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
And,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
That place, that undertow will, like, suck you out to sea and we'll never hear from you again. But we've all, everyone in this room has confronted that.
Yes, and tried to figure it out.
In their practice, right?
Yeah. But so if these aren't people specifically, and they are everyone specifically, which means that anyone can like connect with them, you know, whatever gender, race, age, blah, 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 then they become this language. And then the language, which abstraction's a language, then what does what you were just talking about is you get this sort of like ambiguity between abstraction, between figuration. And then I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think the doubling just reinforces that even more. So we're, you know, everyone's like, and it's amazing how few people say Rorschach, even though I know they're thinking it, right? Because that's what we think of doubling, right? But Rorschach is so abstract, so to have the figuration, it kind of like throws you off. You're like, your brain goes like, well, what?
Well, because in Rorschach, we all know that the prompt is that we have to decide what we see, and that everybody's looking at us and they can't wait to like to judge us about what it is we see, right?
Yeah, like that's not your mom sleeping with a cat.
It's usually it's a setup for some kind of sitcom joke, usually, right? Yeah. So am I the only one that sees? And you're like, okay. So, but because you've given us imagery, it stops that part. Like, I don't have to guess.
Yeah.
It's people, I see them, but not really. And so it takes you like almost to the brink of what a Rorschach experience would be like, but then it gives you an answer, right? It doesn't just leave you on your own to come up with the whole answer. It gives you at least part of it because there are human figures. So you kind of, I don't know what you would call that in that analogy, a safety net, a toehold.
No, it's a
guidepost.
It's a safe place.
Cognitively.
Yeah,
right.
You get to like, because the title of the show, we need mirrors to see ourselves.
Yes.
That's obviously not me in the painting,
no.
And it's not you, but it reflects us.
But
and
even
it reflects
in a mirror,
inner us. It reflects it, right?
But even in a mirror, as we all just finished learning on Zoom, you don't actually see yourself. You see the reversal of yourself. When people,
let's get neurological here. You see your idea of yourself in reverse.
But like every use of a mirror is a reverse.
Yes.
So we just throw that out there, like look in the mirror, see yourself. But actually, if you saw yourself, it would look weird to you because you're used to seeing it reversed. In a mirror, and it's and that's reversed. And so there's
that's why when you get those photographs on your phone where they've accidentally come out backwards, you're like
I look weird, right? And
really
it's like no, that's what everyone else has been seeing this whole time. But that does something in your brain, and it's not hugely important, but it's
there.
It's there, and we've all had that little experience too. So there are doublings like that, just kind of like peppering our optical landscape.
Which is one of the reasons why I chose to do profiles and not frontals.
Interesting.
Because frontals are what almost all art does.
Yeah.
Almost, and it's something someone else was pointing out to me, this whole thing of faces in art, and it's a thing, right? Like, but the profile, it's not the predictable expectation. Like, okay, it's a face, but it's not predictable. You can't see yourself. You can't see your profile in a mirror.
You can try.
You can do but you can't really.
Right.
You can't really. It's tough.
Well, we all have those like
maybe
weird, crazy side-eye selfies where you're trying to that's big, right? Like
but
that.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's.
Well, no, but what's so interesting is that like there's a lot of profound sort of philosophies and different things that feed into this, but it also like has roots into the most unimportant common experiences that we have as we just go around about our day. That that it's tethered to that in these funny little ways, and so it exists in a very serious, contained thought set, but actually. There's a little bit of our just cheeky human nonsense going on as well.
So these guys kissing, are they kissing? Does everyone think they're kissing? I mean, those are two guys kissing, basically, right? But the painting is not necessarily about homosexuality or anything like that, but it has that in it because there's guys kissing. I mean, maybe they're not guys, maybe they're women, I don't know. But I'm just saying.
But what if there's only one of them?
And what if there's only one? He's just looking at his reflection. What if it's just a reflection, or they?
We don't know.
Right,
well, because we don't know. It's ambiguous.
It's very ambiguous, and that ambiguity is essential. It's an essential part of physics. It's an essential part of how we need to interpret the world to operate, I believe, and it's abstract.
Yeah.
It's an essential part of abstraction. So I'm trying to find ways, and I think I have, to have all these layers of meaning that are different departments, different schools, different sections of meaning, different areas of meaning, operating in the paintings kind of at the same time in different places, in different ways, and so that it...
Well, I was thinking about this, on the way over here, like, the idea is that, like, it's one of these things, again, like before, that there are a couple things going on that you don't often encounter with simultaneity. And so one of them is, for example, like, this supercharged palette, this insane sort of like Van Gogh yellow, and it's like, this painting is activating your optic nerve, right? And you're laughing because it's true.
Because it is.
But, that there's a level at which if you wanted to just kind of like enjoy them and notice what was going on with your eyes while you were dealing with them and watching the light dance through them and not think at all about what they mean, you could just do that.
Yeah. And
that's there for you, and they exist in that way. But there's all this other stuff under there also if you want it, and that goes that gamut from personal family history and voyages of self-discovery, all the way to, you know, the theories, painting and color theory and all of that stuff, and some art history, figure ground, and the, you know, the screen, and you know, all of that stuff that we've talked about, that, you know, that's also in there. But then the sort of like next step of that, which is what I said we were going to talk about, because I'm super excited about, is when it's time to make, as I would like to say, when it's time to make this into a
it's natural
building.
Progression. A whole building made out of my paintings.
Made out of your paintings.
And
that sounds hilarious, right? But actually,
I love that phrase.
It's literally
what we're going to do.
Planned.
That is
so
planned.
Tell everybody about that.
This goes back to what you started saying before we even made whatever filming or whatever. So
I think
I made a couple light boxes, and you know, it's a light box. We all know it's, you know, a surface with some lights in the box. Boom. So it's backlit, and that worked. But I realized that it had certain formal limitations, or first of all, it's only one side of a wall, and walls are always two-sided. And so I'm like, okay, glass is two-sided. We use it, you know, I'm trying to be true to the material, right? And so then I realized, okay, if I can make these pieces, and I made a very little one, a very small one, if I can make a little two-sided piece that is edge lit, like where the lights are, you know, hidden within the structure of the wall, then why can't I make a whole building out of that? And if I'm like, in my head, I remember being like, okay, that's crazy. Like, that's simply a crazy idea. And after a while, I was like, wait, that's not that crazy. Like,
you gotta make a building out of something.
Yeah, you gotta make a building out of something, exactly.
Right.
So why not make a building out of my plexiglass luminous paintings? And then it's basically taken me 20 plus years, maybe 25 years, 20 plus years to manifest making the initial works about 3 or 4 years ago that were like, okay, it went from this big to, you know, 2 foot by 2 foot to 4 foot by 4 foot to 6 foot by 6 foot. And now the plan is to go to Virginia, just happens to be, but I want to make one here in Los Angeles as well, and make what's called the Luminous Community Center, which is 20 feet tall and 40 feet wide, and that's it right there. And it's a event space, a meditation space, a place to have a book fair, a farmer's market, a wedding,
first kiss,
a last kiss. You know, you can get in a fight with your best friend. You can have a reunion with your family reunion. You can have a political activist, you know, political meeting, demonstrations, blah 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 blah. Anything. I mean, anything.
So basically, like functionally, like any boring community center you've seen everywhere in every park, that's usually made out of
it's just a building
cinder blocks,
it's just like
and
an
maybe
office.
it has a cool roof.
Yeah, maybe it has extra windows, or maybe, but it's basically just like it's a place to have an AA meeting, or
so,
you know.
So that like most civic type civic spaces, except
this is like a chapel instead. This is like a sacred space. A place where art isn't something that just hangs on the wall, it is the walls. And the space itself is something that then, because of the content of all the stuff we've been talking about, feeds into your experience of the space. So it's immersive, but it's not demanding in the way that it's like, okay, here, you have to look at this video projection on the wall and you have to pretend that you're somehow like, you know, there's this, I hope it strikes a balance between there's a sculpture that I look at and here's this like work that I'm in.
Well, it reminds me, it's essentially, the thing it reminds me of the most is the Serpentine Pavilion.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So
I was thinking Cocteau Cathedral or...
Well, no, but the structure of the Serpentine Pavilion, where every year it's a new one, right? And so Serpentine Galleries is a big park in London, and they commission basically something like about that big, usually not by an architect, usually by a visual artist. and they create something, and it always has some dimension of social use and public. And you know, I don't know how many they're up to now, 20 of them or so. And I mean, sometimes it's architects, but when it's architects, it's like Frida Escobedo or somebody that's like super out there. So often it's not
always on the art end.
Right, and so, and then it lives like, it only kind of, it lives in the park for a year, and then, you know, somebody always buys it and it goes. But that idea that, you know, while it's there, it's not just it is a giant public sculpture, but it's very much not only that. And that it's architecturally sound enough to be used by the public, to be free and welcoming and open, and to do a thing. And I think 2 years ago they made it a free restaurant or something like that. You know, another time they made it all. I think last year the artist did it in such a way that like almost the entire structure could be used by local wildlife in some way, safe way. You know, very bee friendly eaves. You know, that kind of things. They want it to be kind of part. Anyway, everyone has a different purpose, but it reminded me of that a little bit because no one's asking, you know, Hans and Bettina if it's a building or a sculpture. It's right, like they've carved this space out, that it's something in between. And so that's why I say that it reminds me of that. But also too, the luminosity means like, so during the day, just like the work, during the day it's ambient light, at night it's lit from
so the thing about the luminous pieces is that, like I said about the other pieces, the glass absorbs light. And the paints that I mix have mediums and varnishes and all sorts of stuff in them, so they also absorb light. So the pieces change color and shift tone and shift hue, and because of the layering, there's shadows from one area of paint to another. But what I discovered with these pieces, which this will happen with this, is that they actually change colors in the evening. So these go from warm to these, you start to see these cool blues and greens that start to just rise up out of the piece. And that's really blown my mind, because that's a thing that I didn't even plan.
Weirdos.
A lot of stuff in the work I didn't plan.
But so some weirdos in Virginia are actually going to let you do this, maybe?
This is being proposed for a park in Richmond, Virginia, and I have put together this just insanely amazing team of developers and fundraisers and glass art people in Germany and artistic, like public art fabricator people who've done like 20,000 projects all over the world. And the miracle is that these people are like, you know, I've never made a piece of public art, let's just say that, but these people are like, we believe in you believe in your vision, we believe in your idea. I mean, this is going to be 200 tons of glass.
Jesus.
It's going to be 250,000 square feet of glass and plexiglass. The doors themselves are going to weigh 8 tons each. So just the engineering to design the doors.
That's a building. See, it's a lot for a sculpture, but how much does a building weigh?
Well, right? It's a 20-foot tall door.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And
well, I hope, you know, I mean, I'm genuinely excited because I think
everyone that sees it has been so excited, which is really beautiful, because it was, you know, it's one of those things, and this is one of the beautiful things about art. It's like, you come up with an idea, you're like, you know, you bat it around like we were talking before about different, you know, structures, different ways of working. And then you're like, okay, well, what about this idea? And you share it with someone, they go, well, maybe that is cool. And, you know, and so everyone has seen it, has responded so positively. And then the artist who helped me make these renderings from works, from some of the largest luminous works that I made about 3 or 4 years ago, made these renderings, and they've come out, they communicate it so well.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I mean, I think it's oddly, but it's almost presciently, this conversation, because, you know, okay, so fractured society, all kinds of proposed measures for like reminding us that other people are real and that we should care about them and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, but like at the same time, a lot of those public spaces are contested because until recently they've been populated with monuments that we were told were for us all, but were obviously never for really anyone, and or one kind of person only. And so now there's this whole sort of rush from the art community to kind of fill that void. And like, okay, well, what should we make a monument to instead? And that's an amazing, fascinating conversation. But I often wonder if keeping the word monument in that question is kind of bringing last year's problems along.
I went out of my way.
And this isn't a monument.
No, I went out of my way to not use the word monument.
Right.
It's not because I'm not engaged in that, the politics of that dialogue, because I absolutely am, as a black person, as a Jewish person, as someone who's like social justice and all that is essential to my life. Like, of course, that's essential and important. But monument's a word that should be in the discussion about all those horrible things, and we need to think of creating public spaces in a new way.
In a new way, exactly. What was the good part about the monuments building meant to achieve? Well, it was meant to be a focal point for physical gathering and amplification of a shared identity that we can celebrate.
History,
right?
Narrative.
And a story about ourselves. And like, that's what it was for. And then it just happened to be that like the vast majority of them told a really fucked up story.
Well, and intentionally. Intentionally.
But if you take that part out, but you keep like, okay, so how can you activate a public space with something permanent enough that people know it's important, but you're not telling them what the story is.
So these abstract faces.
Because it's the story that they're bringing when they come, right? And that idea is what should survive from that conversation.
And I think that this works that way because you have these forms where you come up to it and it's a face, but it's not a particular face. So its identity is totally fluid and totally open, and it's symbolically made. It's not so figurative that it's because it's. Even if it was totally ambiguous, but it was realistic, it still is doing this thing.
No, you need to create like just enough of a suggestion that like people should be in this.
Like people, that it's about you.
People are here. Humanity exists within this world of my art.
That it mirrors
But that's all the information you're getting.
Well, then you could bring
humanity is you, it's them, it's us, it's everyone, it's the past, it's whatever. Like. But it's not just open-ended. Like it's.
Well, if it was just a wall, right?
Yeah.
Then it would be, again, yes, it could be beautiful and luminous, and you walk around it, and that'd be cool. But it would then still just be a thing you walk up and you stare at. That thing was kind of cool, whatever. This is something you could literally, you could watch a movie in, you could dance in, you could see a band in.
I'm sure a lot of people would be doing dance in there, whether you like it or not.
You can do yoga. You can
lots of yoga.
It becomes part of a living
I'd go
space.
To a sound bath there.
Sound bath, or what's the thing? Or Integratron. You have the Integratron could do like a traveling thing where they go to Richmond and like fill that with ambient noise, like and it's also just a space to just chill out,
right?
And like in the shade, in this beautiful color bath of light, because that's one thing this doesn't communicate, is that the sun, when it shines through this thing, is going to cascade this incredible wash of color.
That sounds great.
Oh,
it sounds beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine just like yellows and oranges just across the...
It's just so interesting because it's like there almost isn't a fully precise description of it from precedent. Because it's like, it's like this, but it's not that. It's like this, but it's not that. It's these things that shouldn't go together, but here they are. And so there's a kind of inventing itself happening throughout the way that you described coming to this technique for your paintings, and the way that like this came to be that. I almost said mirrors itself. I'm so sorry.
No,
that's a horrible, because it's
no,
a
it's
pun.
not. It's
I know, but it was
it's
like,
fine.
it's
I use the word reflect,
we need mirrors.
reflect, echo, mirror.
No, but I came to that place, like, it mirrors that.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is about, like, say the Serpentine Pavilion. They ask artists to do it, but it almost never looks like the art that they do. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're an artist that is beloved and talented and renowned, and so they give them this commission, and then the artist does a thing where they try to figure out what a building they made would look like.
Okay.
And it's fascinating. But this is not that, because it's literally made of
my
your
paintings.
right?
Yeah.
So that's, again, that's
Cool.
one of those
I
things.
like
It's
that, yeah.
like, it's very much like something we know, but
Yeah.
then it's this kind of other thing.
Yeah.
And that keeps happening with you,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Mhm.
So I guess you did have to kind of come up with a name for yourself, and hence Luminous.
Yeah.
See,
Well,
that makes sense now.
If light is what allows us to know anything, because of course in the dark, what would we have done had we evolved in the dark? Maybe we would have come up with another way. I mean, this is really out there shit, right?
Yeah.
But like, what would we have done if we, that's like Plato and the cave and all that. But like,
Yeah.
so light is essential to everything that we do, and light is captured by these paintings. Light is a medium in the paintings.
What happens to someone's photons when they die? Can they, like,
Notice
bequeath them to
Stop.
someone else?
I was explaining that, okay, so there's this thing called the light tunnel. And that's basically the idea that all the photons that come into your eye are only yours. Nobody else gets to have the photons that you have. It's a plain fact.
I share some with her, though.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Prove they don't.
You might want to, but
If
I'm
this-
sorry to tell you, that's very cute.
This
It's
is
very
a
romantic.
This is a photon
It's very
sharing
romantic.
structure.
This is a
Only
right, no,
in
you're
there
right.
can you share
You can-
photons.
Well, you can share
Well, no,
the
but-
general idea of them, but they're still going to be your own individual
I mean,
photons.
I'm laughing, but I'm also kind of curious because, like, as we're talking about this, and people seeing themselves in the work and it activating a community and a sense of a shared story as well. It just reminded me that you had said that, and I thought suddenly, well, what happens to them? Because if no matter in the universe can be created or destroyed, they go somewhere. So do they just get retired, like Jersey 23?
Oh, you're talking about the photons?
Or does somebody else
they
get
get
them?
transmuted in your eye into energy. That's what there's literally in the back of your eye, the photon turns into electrical energy, and that's what feeds into your electrical system. But that's a whole other story.
That weirdly makes
That's
a little
whole
bit
other
more
story.
sense now.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't want you to think that.
No. But just to say,
They
like,
decay. They decay.
They decay, like,
They decay.
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But that sort of activation, and like, this is a place where that conversation
Would happen.
and seem perfectly like.
Well, one of the words people have used repeatedly about this is that this is like a beacon.
Yeah.
So like you're in the park and you walk up and you're like, what's that over there? And there's this glowing, spot, and you get over there. And it's like moth to flame, but it's like
a little sci-fi.
It's very sci-fi.
Very, like-
Yeah. It's like the UFO landed and you can go inside.
Stranger Things, kind of, little
Right,
bit.
a little.
But then at the same time, like, I mean, I love joking with you, but at the same time, like, it sort of self-creates, it self-fulfills in terms of the community creation, because, like, you're standing there, there's no way you're not going to discuss it with the other people standing there.
Because it's so
out there.
Yeah.
So people are going to look at each other and
Yeah.
be like, this is crazy, or I love it here, I come here every day, I've never been here, whatever.
Yeah.
A conversation.
Yeah.
Similar to what maybe happens in front of, the water lilies or something, or people stand in
Sure,
a
of
museum
course,
and then
yeah.
there's someone
Yeah.
standing there,
No.
but like at scale.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And crucially, not only among self-selected art people.
Absolutely.
Because this is in a public green space. So you're not getting only people who've decided to spend their day at a museum. You're getting
Absolutely.
people on their way to
All
the work,
people.
dentist
All
school,
people.
whatever.
Kids out there,
Right.
families doing barbecues, the whole, because it's in a park and it's a public space.
And that's a different
And one other
thing
thing too, right,
yeah.
is that the colors, someone comes back and they're going to be like, did they change it or something? Because it will look different. Like the cloud over here will suddenly make this whole area look reddish when instead of the previous time they were there and it was yellow, or even, because I'm always amazed with how interesting it is at people's perception of art. You'll have people, I kid you not, you'll have people who will come a third or a fourth time and be like, those are faces. They'll be like, I didn't see that before. Because they just won't, they won't register it. Like,
yeah, right, until sometime later.
Until the fourth time, and they're like, whoa, that's a big 20-foot tall face.
But that's what you want, from art. Like, you want people say this, like, I could take this home, and every time I look at it, I see something different.
Right.
Those are kinds of things.
I make that literal, though.
Literal.
On a literal level.
In a building.
No, I mean in the art.
In the art, that's what I'm saying.
In the art, that like, and you will literally see something different because the way light interacts with the works makes things shift and change.
In these works.
Even in these works, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which I'm proud that happened.
Yeah.
Well, proud's the right word. I'm just happy that
You can be proud.
Okay.
You worked hard for decades.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud that has that formal action, that formal structure exists because it keeps me enamored. It keeps me intoxicated by the work.
You had an idea. And then you figured it out. Like, you had an idea and you experimented and figured out how to make reality match the idea you had. So that's not nothing, right? Like, that's the job, you know?
Yeah.
So, good job.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.